So, first of all, welcome to everyone to our webinar this morning. This webinar is with myself and Sarah Bazen, who will introduce herself in a moment. But this webinar really is the result of the digital impact or digital intervention impact forecaster that was developed. This came from a discussion that Sarah and I had about a year or so, and then we collaborated to kind of turn that discussion into reality.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm Sarah Bazen. I'm the Digital Infrastructure Strategic Lead for West Sussex County Council. So I do recognise a few names there. So obviously as local government colleagues, we've all crossed paths more or less. So yeah, happy to be on this call this morning, just share a little bit of our experience and obviously hear from yourselves as well, because as we all know, we're really in this together and sharing this learning is really important. That's it.
Great,
from me.
Thanks, Sarah. So I guess, as I said at the start, you and I had an initial discussion about the concept of a tool that could be used to help demonstrate what the impact of different kinds of interventions, fixed broadband, mobile, inclusion, a whole raft of things. We had that conversation, probably a year ago or so now. It was like summer last year. What was behind that initial kind of desire from yourself? What kind of drove you to think, wouldn't it be great if we could do this?
Yeah. So I think from my point of view, I've always been really clear on how we see our benefits kind of more generally. But it's always been really difficult to get like a consistent understanding and to feel confident in something that's actually kind of more evidence-based. So I think from a kind of general benefits sort of framework perspective, we kind of look at West Sussex, we kind of look at those benefits across three kind of categories. And a lot of this is really to be able to confidently speak to stakeholders, which is really important and increasingly so. And obviously look at how we effectively start our projects and our initiatives in a really consistent and on a solid footing. So I suppose those sort of three areas we look at just briefly is very similar, I'm sure, to other colleagues on the call, but certainly external funding from business cases. So grant funding in the past from a variety of sources, really needing to save time, especially at strategic outline cases. We just don't want to pour tons of money and time and resource on something that's more of an idea. So that was definitely something that really me to want to be a bit more efficient. So that getting that hold of that external funding, which we have been quite successful in doing in the past, but it's not without a substantial amount of effort. And I suppose the other area where we look at benefits is the commercial investment that these types of interventions effectively lead to. So telecoms investment that we then leverage in off the back of some of those funding cases. And then I think those are, for me, are the ones that are really important as well, because they are big numbers and none of us want to necessarily keep going out and investing in this. We want to attract this inward investment. So that, and they're big numbers, tens or sometimes hundreds of millions, which is really important. And I suppose that third area for me, and this is the bit that I'd literally say drove me mad over a period of many years, is the other benefits. Very much we're place-based, so economic outcomes, really hard, GBA, high value jobs, innovations, those sorts of things. And also increasingly, more recently, public service delivery. How do digital interventions support that, which hasn't been my natural space, but is starting to become so. And I'm sure colleagues have had that experience as well, or have always been in there. And the other thing, a bit more recently, carbon. So I think, what was behind it and sort of the journey was, being able to get to those strategic outline cases. Importantly, at the moment, being able to look back and demonstrate what we've leveraged in, using that to sort of convince quite a lot of new stakeholders, actually, which we do have now in West Sussex. So that was pretty much it.
And I guess, that you mentioned the time saving, and and the fact that, as you say, if you're at a kind of concept or an idea stage, or trying to decide if you're going to bid for funding, or whether you've got a good enough case internally or externally, I guess. How would the council have kind of predicted the return on investment or impact before you had this kind of tool? And I guess now you've got it, are you seeing it give you those time savings that you were hoping for?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think it was just always really difficult. And the tool that we use now, it doesn't go 100% of the way. There's a lot of other things that we still need to do, but it does save a huge amount of time. I think the thing to remember, where we found it really difficult was in the sort of economic impact area. We're not economists. We have an economy team. I'm in place services. They are my colleagues, but they don't do this kind of thing either necessarily. And we also, couldn't build a framework that would easily just give me by putting the inputs in, give me the outputs that I needed for some of these strategic cases. So I think we've got a PMO, so Program Management Office, which is really, really busy. And we were always, and we still do this, getting all of our projects that the PMO looked after to always constantly feed back, but it was feeding this machine of the PMO and then just tracking the data in the PMO, and being able to make use of it quickly afterwards was really difficult. So we did obviously the usual stuff. We logged metrics from past projects. We went out, we did benefits realization, lessons learned, and we reused all of that. And we reused inputs consistently, which did help. But it didn't give you the confidence that you need because it wasn't particularly evidence-based. The other thing that I kind of found was previously, where we were doing lots of sort of mobile broadband coverage type, sort of fast gigabit type projects, coverage projects. There were we kind of used the old method. I'm sure many of you remember this, of drawing a buffer zone outside and looking at how many addressable premises that were in there, and which of those were residential and which of those were businesses. And the team had spreadsheets trying to work out, kind of what that might mean in terms of jobs, resilience, etc. and GDA. Really time consuming, and actually it's moved on now, so it's not really just about those addressable premises. You can't layer in mobile, small cells, macro coverage capacity from mobiles into that space either. And then for mobile, what we've had to do more recently, which I feel there's less of out there to even draw on consistently, in terms of evidence, because you can ask AI, and we've asked AI, that is one of the things that we do sometimes. Is, what would we get if we did this in this area? But it comes back with some like really spurious and crazy things that I've been retroengineered and found to be spurious and crazy. Some of it's not a bad start for some of it, but it doesn't get you where you want to go. So for mobile, it's been absolutely going back from the ground up and building on use cases. But the problem is, when you want to build on mobile, on any kind of use case, you've got to get that engagement really early with the stakeholders, and then that sets up all sorts of expectations of what they want. And we haven't written strategic outline case yet, so that's really time consuming and kind of difficult to manage, really. So we used, and still do use, a flavour of all of those things, but this really does kind of cut through it, make it a lot quicker.
And I guess you're right, when you start those engagements, it does kind of set expectations, rightly or wrongly, that well, something's going to happen, and that it's going to be a positive thing that's going to happen. So I guess I know from our conversations, one of the things that you were keen to be able to do was test out different scenarios and what benefits they might bring, maybe before you start going and engaging people and kind of setting rabbits off. So is that been helpful to be able to kind of maybe do some early testing about, what if we did this, what if we did it in this place versus this place, like what does that look like?
It's really good, actually, because that has been really helpful, because we've had our own sort of little sandpit to play around in, and So we're able to, the way it's set up for us is that we've broken it down into districts. So we'll have Crawley district, Worthing, Chichester, etc. Some of those are kind of quite rural areas predominantly with visitor economy. Some of those are urban areas with visitor economy and other things. And then there's different levels of deprivation across those and different levels of micro and SMEs, micro businesses and SMEs. So it has been really interesting to just try and say, well, if we did it over here, what would that look like? Because what I want to know is when am I going to get my money back? But not just that, what are the returns? So that's been really helpful. So yeah, certainly on a case-based basis, it's been really helpful to understand where we can get that kind of those biggest returns, and also we've also been able to see where we might not get the biggest return, but when we get the quickest return as well. So that's been really good, and we can do that really quietly on our own without having to engage anyone at too early a stage, which is really good. The other thing I was going to mention, because it really surprised me when I was let loose on it to begin with and played around on it, was so West Sussex, my team is really focused on digital infrastructure. So digital infrastructure for us has always been historically, broadband, now more recently mobile. We're in the innovation space, looking at data centers. We do spines and all of those sorts of things, but we didn't really do anything particularly in the way of digital inclusion. We supported it, and we certainly supported our own colleagues across other departments, but we never led on anything on it. And it's got the tool's got some inputs and obviously the outputs around digital inclusion and sort of more community-based projects. So I was kind of feeling around, and I was also watching Martin Lewis on the TV, Money Saving Expert, thinking actually there's a really big area here that we are as a team not covering in terms of low-income families in some of our particular deprived areas, and looking at families because they're multi-generational as well, and what having access to good quality devices and education, if you like, and connectivity will do. And I was so surprised actually that it came out so high, and I thought, okay, this is something. So we have now launched a pilot in Crawley, just with 40 families, but the payback's really good over quite a long period of time, and also it's something completely different. And we're now looking to replicate that in another area as well, which has also got high deprivation.
That's great.
So those insights actually were, quite surprising.
And I guess, thinking about it from that kind of place-based and region-based perspective, West Sussex, like lots of areas, is going through, LGR at the moment. Do you think that the tool is helpful for, because, you guys certainly are now going to be looking at slightly different areas that you might not have looked at before. You might have some slightly different regional priorities because there's obviously a bit of tension between, save, invest. So, what do you think? Will it help? Will it not help? Does it change perspective for people you're having to deal with?
I think I can only speak for myself, but so we're in the unenviable position of being in Devo and in LGR over the next 2 years in exactly the same time frame, which is problematic. It's just horrendous. I'm sure other colleagues have got their head in their hands. But however, so we're in this strange position of transition, which is really difficult, and obviously huge funding pressures. We are not a statutory service, so that's really interesting. And I think all non-statutory teams are definitely feeling vulnerable, in one sense, but also feeling really full of optimism. And this is really great opportunity actually, but it's the transition of getting there. So I think from kind of my perspective, the way I sort of understand LGR and how it's impacting us in this transitional phase and planning is it's very much around public service transformation, we're looking at doing things differently, more efficiently, more effectively. Digital plays a huge role in that. So obviously there is transformation teams within our own organisation. And so that does feel a little bit about kind of save, but you have to invest to save, but that's also a difficult way of being able to, it's also difficult to be able to evidence that. And then, of course, on the other end, we've got devolution and the mayor and this great opportunity to really do things at scale, a scale that we haven't been able to do. We work really well with our neighbours along the south coast, but so we've got that kind of both of those things going on in the same kind of space. So I think what the tool kind of does is allow us to sort of play around with that and to be able to make those proposals of what a larger strategic authority could look like, what we could scale and what that would mean. That allows us to play around with that. It also, through the public services kind of tab on the tool, allow us to get those inputs out, not just around GVA and prosperity, but also around what those savings would be at a high level. Obviously, when we then go down and start to drill down into, well, what would it mean for waste, or what would it mean for social care, that that's different, but it gives us a really good starting point. And I think what it really does is, in a kind of refreshing way, it kind of unscrambles my head in a way, because I had sort of prosperity here and savings over here. But what it does really well is it kind of treats projects as real world projects, because it has both, and then you can dial up and down within an initiative to see where you want it to go, or actually cut that into two, and do this as a line, so you can just change those variables. I think the other thing I was just going to say, we've got with a new administration at West Sussex, we've got lots and lots of new stakeholders, loads of new members. This is not an area that's necessarily familiar to them. We've got a really good track record through our Open Digital programme over many years, over lots and lots of different things. But what we've been able to do as well now is to look back at the last 10 years and not having had the benefit of something like this at the time, and really look at what those benefits are. So we are now able to find GVA figures and other sorts of figures around impact more generally, economy, but also sort of community, carbon. It's got a carbon tab, which is really good as well. So it does allow us to say, yes, we did all of these great things, and we.
This is what it meant.
But this is what it actually meant, and it feels like when I go out to bat now a little bit for our sector and the team and what we want to achieve in the future, it feels a bit more, a lot more on solid ground, rather than just relying on, well, we did this and it was a great project and we did these, we had these benefits at the time. So it certainly makes that much more robust and credible and easier for me, in the sense that it's I can explain it.
That changes the narrative a little bit, doesn't it? Because I guess, not necessarily ourselves, and and I'm not going to name names, but that sometimes in the past there has been a temptation at all levels, both within government, within local authorities, within everyone, I guess. Sometimes the measure of a good project delivery was, did you do it on time, and did you spend all the money, and did you more or less hit the number of premises you were aiming for, or whatever, and that was a great project. If you did X number of premises with the right amount of money in the right amount of time, great project. And to be fair, that is a successful project. But I guess this slightly changes that narrative, doesn't it, as you say, and that it's actually, but what did it mean? What did it do for the economy? What did it do for well-being? What did it do for our net zero aspirations? So and I guess we've certainly seen, and I'm interested to know your perspective, like how important is that kind of data in helping with robust business cases for investment, internally and externally, or evidencing, things that you've already done just to show what the impact has been? Because, my sense is there's definitely been an increase in a requirement for that over the last couple of years. Certainly with any external funding, there's definitely been more focus on things like benefits. What is it going to achieve? When is it going to achieve it? How are you going to measure it? So, I mean, do you think, are you seeing the same thing?
I think from our perspective, in the past, we've been able to access quite a lot of grant funding. But for me, I see that as drying up. The LEPs have gone, certainly in the traditional sense, in the traditional sources rather. DCMS, BDUK, not as much, and so external funding is starting to become more problematic. Of course, the big opportunity is, why do we want to run after too much external funding anyway? And that's been my big kind of push me, pull you kind of thing in the past. And we want it, but at the same time, we don't want to dance to their tune. And that's where the big opportunity with the mayor, and I'm sure colleagues who have already gone through devolution can testify to that. And I know they've had huge successes in having a much more longer term strategy that's actually funded, and that's really well integrated in terms of spatial planning with other things. But you still need the data for all of that, and more so because they're probably bigger and bigger projects. I think where it's helpful is definitely those initial stages when you're doing that outline, sort of strategic outline case, really. To support those funding applications, because at that point it is quite minimal the amount of funding you want to put. So if I wanted to, in the past, if I'd gone out and wanted to get external funding, that's a considerable amount of money, and as I said before, we're not economists, etc. So I might have had to go out, and I have in the past gone out and got various consultants, etc. But we don't want to be doing that at this stage. So it is really important. I think the other thing for me, in terms of where it's important internally for the data for sort of business cases, is where we do have money, it is really under pressure. And I've always said that in our benefits, kind of those three benefit categories, over the top, you've got the funding that you leverage in. And then you've got that you actually bid for. Then you've got the funding that you attract as inward investment, and you can add another zero because that's big money. And then you've got also GVA over and other benefits over time, which is you can add another zero on necessary depending. And so that's like how I've always understood it for us. And so where you get the really big numbers is by trying to anchor some of those in that initial investment. Which is why the data is really important. So it's not important just for the project benefits, but it's important for the consequential outcomes of that project, which for us is definitely commercial investments, and also the economic outputs, the skills, the land values going up, all of those sorts of things are really interesting. And I think for me, certainly, that's really important now. Because my experience, and be interesting to hear from colleagues, is that there's just not a lot on offer externally. But actually, I don't want to necessarily be doing bid after bid externally. I want to be able to.
They come with a lot of
have it
overhead.
Sustainable. They
come with a lot of overhead and a lot of initial cost, and they are inevitably always competitive, and there will be winners and losers in those things. You can invest quite a lot of time and effort in preparing what is quite a good bid, but there was never enough money for everyone in all of those bids. We've seen that many times. I guess last question from me then, and then we might open the floor up to questions from others and stop the recording after this. But so last question from me. We've talked a little bit about the kind of digital interventions, fixed, mobile, etc. What are you seeing in terms of what that looks like going forward? Is it still filling gaps in fixed broadband? Is it more now kind of looking towards mobile coverage and capacity? Is it actually moving away from infrastructure and more into things like inclusion and how the infrastructure is actually being used by people to deliver those economic and kind of social benefits? Like what do you think? What's your view?
that's a really tricky one, isn't it? And I think I'd like to say when I joined the team in, I think it's 2016, it was all about superfast, wasn't it? Or,
Yeah.
1 or 2 man teams running around doing superfast contracts.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think it shouldn't be about that anymore. And there was a bit of hope, certainly with Project Gigabit, that we wouldn't be in that space now. Obviously, for those that are impacted by the recent announcements for Project Gigabit, that's now changed. So we are still in that fixed broadband space, certainly in rural areas, which we have a lot of. So yes, we're still in that space. It's not necessarily for us to pick up, but certainly to attract investment and work out how we do that is definitely a challenge, and one we're sort of still working out what we do with. Increasingly over the last 4 years or so, for us, it's been very much around mobile. The mobile space. So we've worked increasingly with mobile network operators directly, which is really new, because when I first started, there wasn't even a front door to knock at. They've now much more welcoming, the MNOs, which is really great, and also neutral hosts. So we're working very much in that space, both supporting macro networks and the big on the sort of larger scale, but also small cells in the capacity and coverage space, especially in some of these sort of medium-sized towns, I'd say, rather than cities. We don't really have too many of those, and especially where there's a real heavy focus on visitor economy and doing things differently from a public services perspective in these places. So definitely that. And then also for us, we've got into certain sectors as well. So we really leaned into what we've got in West Sussex, not trying to attract lots of things that wouldn't want to be here naturally. So but working with particular sectors, some very technical, and so quantum certainly but also the very technical as well, viticulture and growing, which is becoming so we're definitely leaning into those sectors and working with them more. And then that as I was saying earlier, we are very place-based, and we are always my team's very driven by economic outputs. So the whole digital inclusion thing was not necessarily something we did a lot of work in, but obviously now we are definitely more in that space, and definitely more in that public transformation space. So I think it's just got bigger, but in a way it's got arms and legs, hasn't it? And it should have. So I think the challenge for me personally, and I'm sure I can learn from colleagues, is how to sort of grow all those arms and legs in a sustainable way. But certainly data and benefits are very, really close to being able to support us in doing that. So I am really hopeful. And very much part of our prosperity strategy as well, so that we can scale these things into these new geographies.
And I'm sure that you will continue to be as successful as you guys have been previously, Sarah.